So what I thought is I'll just share with you just 2 slides, maybe to capture some of my thoughts, reflecting based on what I heard yesterday and the reflection and a lot of things I learned over the years. So the first one is we heard a lot about yesterday about how healthcare systems are just slow, right? It's just like everything, you want to do anything, your great idea, it takes a long time in there. So I would like to challenge that in there. And I actually believe it's possible for healthcare system to go much, much faster. And one of the reasons I believe that's possible is, when VSee was initially started, we were not a healthcare company. Started work as military. So for example, if you were to look at all the different US government agencies, then compared to Navy SEALs, we did a lot of work for Navy SEALs. So Navy SEAL moves really fast. Right, so they have the concept is there's reversible decisions, then one-way decision. So reversible means you make the decision, like let's say you decide to go to this conference, it was awful, you go back, it's not that big a deal, right? Nothing much has changed your life, right? One-way decision, you make the decision, you can't really turn back in there. So turn out that most of the enterprises, they make decisions assuming everything's one way, right? You get committee, you talk about it, you get lawyers involved, all these different things. So the whole idea is any decision you make, decide whether it's reversible or not reversible. Turn out that most of the decisions are reversible. In those kinds, just do it, right? You don't need these lengthy discussions. So we actually think it's possible for, like we internally did a lot of brainstorming and just think about all these ideas we want to try out. So we actually believe it's possible in healthcare to have ideas to go live, to actual data that you can gain insight as short as 21 days in there. And then another thing we heard a lot about people, the typical complaint, right? You go into these healthcare conferences, people talk about, I built this patient portal, I have, let's say, no engagement, I do this thing, how come I don't get a user in there? Especially in telehealth, typically the rule of thumb in telehealth, the adoption is not that high. So often is people start blaming the users. It's always like, well, maybe it's just healthcare system intrinsically, everything's really slow, it takes a long time to get the provider educated, get the consumer trained up, which is all true in there. But the way I would view this is, if you think about this like take that, whatever you try to build, take it out of the healthcare context. Imagine you build some consumer product in there. So chances are the very first version you build, the minimum viable product, you will not get user adoption. And turn out that the same thing we find that the data we experience in the healthcare, that actually applies to all consumer products. Even if you look at a lot of the amazing products from YouTube, Dropbox, when they were initially created, right, it's not like you get the instant adoption. It actually takes a long time to percolate through this. So the way we think is the best way to create this adoption, right, is this, most of the system that's created today really is you're at the minimum viable product stage. And it actually takes a lot of experiments until you turn that into something you can have a mass adoption. So internally we have the joke is, if you don't have adoption, don't blame the user, don't say, oh, this is healthcare, intrinsic healthcare slow. Just find the mirror. That's a person to blame. And that's the path to actually getting adoption in there. So another thing we find is the theme of our work a lot of time is really think about time and productivity in there. So we typically, rule of thumb, we like to recommend within when you do whether healthcare project, even within your enterprise, try to create a role of a chief time officer. So what I mean by this, if you think about typically every enterprise, they have a chief financial officer, right? They count every dollar you spend, you go on lunch, they do all this, right? If you think about all the time people spend counting dollars in there versus the productivity often that's lost by picking, for example, let's say this EMR product, there's way too many clicks. How do you quantify the impact on productivity? So the idea is by having this concept of chief time officer, you could actually make a better analysis of these choices, and that actually will become a path for you to build something that's very successful. And so typically in the way we think about this, there are 2 elements you have to focus on. First is the productivity of a single provider, a single nurse. How could this person be more productive, getting their work done fast? If you don't have that, you will not get adoption in there. You could do a lot of pilots. In fact, I would venture to say, if you look at the entire telehealth industry, right, every hospital have done probably a dozen pilots in there. And the reason they couldn't get adoption is the productivity on that individual level is not there. So the next thing is you also have to think about the system efficiency in there, not just a single doctor, single nurse, but the entire system. Then once you have that, then you actually have profit in there. And then the final thing I'll share with you is there's a lot of, like, for example, you read the newspaper, you go to conferences, right? And there's like speaker after speaker that put up slides to talk about there's a huge physician shortage is coming up in the next 20 years. It's going to be just a disaster, all those different things. So I actually believe there is no physician shortage. But what is the shortage is right now the marketplace is inefficient. There's no incentive for physician to be in there. For example, yesterday I was sitting at dinner next to Dr. Hala Saber. So she organized this physician mom, right? Like about 70,000, follower in there, right? These are sort of working mom. So if you look at, there's a lot of these huge pockets of these sort of physician labor that's currently just untapped. Again, physicians are leaving practice office because the incentive are not there. We made the job so awful that it's just like, why in there. So we believe actually, just like any free market system, right? Assuming the incentives is there, assuming you can make a system that's really, really simple, then the system will naturally balance out. Again, all these things you read about physician shortage, things will naturally sort out. So the way we approach this under this American Doc is we're basically creating what we believe will be the simplest app to create this marketplace. So the whole idea is lets you just have couple hours here and there, you can easily express that availability. And you can also let you just, even on the ad hoc moments, say, okay, I'm available now. And this will allow you to create these sort of sequence job assignments, various things, and you could easily capture that. Again, the whole idea is making that, taking small slices of work in there, put them into the marketplace, and make that very efficient. And then we believe this will be able to solve a lot of these physician shortage issues. And part of our thinking is within this American Doc, take care of malpractice insurance. We're basically we'll be using the Model Health to take care of all the sort of credentialing, all this. Just again, all the stuff, right? You need to get done to take care of all that. And one of the key concepts behind this is it's a market way how we price this thing in there. Again, it'd be interesting to hear about how we actually price the physician services come tomorrow. Again, we think there's some really interesting idea behind there, from search pricing to all these different things, and this natural balance of the market. And the good news is now you could actually, for people who are looking for physician, for clinic, and you can have a very easy, effective way to get this.